Good evening, JW kids. Welcome back to Book Club. All through the month of October, Wednesdays and Saturdays, we will be posting 3 chapters a night of this book called The Outsider by Katy Morgan. And this is only our second night doing this, so if you missed chapters 1 through 3, you can go back and listen to that, or you can just pick up right here. I want to remind us what's going on in the story so far. So we met Ruth, who I think is 12 years old, if I'm remembering correctly, and she is a Moabite. That means that she lives in Moab, and she met some strangers that she was very interested in. Naomi is the woman that she met, the mom, and then she had 2 boys who were a little bit older than Ruth. She's very interested in this family, especially because they have a different faith than she does. She, Ruth, worships all different gods. Even one of them is even a rock that she worships. And Naomi doesn't. Naomi worships the one true God. And Ruth is very curious about this and wants to learn more about these strangers from the country Judah. And so we're going to pick up where we left off in chapter 4, and thank you so much to Sola for reading to us tonight.
At last, we had word from home. The labor was over, and the baby had been born. My mother and the little one were both fine, but it was another girl. This made my father go tight-lipped, and my mother mourned at me that it was about time I left home to get married. Well, that's the way of things, said Dina sadly when I complained about this in her presence. Particularly in a family with as many mouths to feed as yours. You're very expensive, I'm afraid, Ruth. I flushed. I'm not just an expense. I do loads of work. Oh yes, she replied. But you are destined to leave, aren't you? Your brother will always stay with your parents, but you will soon belong to someone else. So when your parents give you food and clothes, they are really providing for someone else's family. I scowled. There is no point in complaining about the way the world works, said Dina sharply. Now go and do your chores. Your mother will soon be wondering where you are. As I stormed away, she called after me in a softer voice. Don't worry though. Rudely. You're too young yet for marriage, and your mother might not say it, but she needs you. She certainly did. There was washing to do, and firewoods to collect, and herbs to pick, and floors to sweep, and siblings to mind, and clothes to mend, and water to fetch, and grains to grind into flour. And over the next few weeks, it felt like all of it was done by me. I barely had any time to spend with Orpah, and I barely had any time to seek out Naomi. I did see her 2 sons from time to time. To begin with, they were just running errands for Dina and her husband, but soon they started doing jobs for others in the village as well. Marlon, the older one, still had no shoes, but it didn't seem to slow him down as he ran with a message here or heaved a jar of oil there. Kilon, the younger one, was less stronger than his older brother, but still worked hard enough. Their mother Naomi stayed inside Dina's courtyard, and Elimelech seemed to be too ill to do anything much. But at every time, everyone came out to the fields. There was a job for everyone during the Abli harvest. The men swung their sickles, hefting them around and then around again to cut the barley at its base. The woman put the cut stalks into big bundles, then stacked 5 or 6 bundles together to dry out. The children ran around behind them and picked up whatever bits the woman had dropped. Everyone toiled, except the very oldest men sitting on their logs by the field edges. This was the first year that I encountered as a woman and not as a child, and I was not very happy about it. My hands were chapped red and cut in places, and my skin prickled with all the tiny bits of stalk and chaffs that has been stuck themselves through my clothes. What made it worse was that it wasn't fair. Orpah, over in her father's fields, was still scampering around with the younger children. They'll put Kilon there to help with the women. He wasn't big enough yet to be much used with a sickle, and that meant Oprah wasn't needed. I straightened up to look over into our fields, which was the next plot to ours. There she was. She wasn't even picking up bits of grains. She was standing in the shade, drinking water. And were those raisins she was putting in her mouth? My stomach rumbled with jealousy. Is it time for a break? I called to my mother. She had her arms around a bundle of barley and was pulling out a few stalks to twist together and tie. She was grunting with the effort. She didn't even glance at me. I am going to have a break, I shouted. Still no response. Right, I said, and ran off quickly in case she noticed and called me back. By the time I reached the scrap of shade at the edge of Oprah's field, I was even hotter and redder in the face than before. I flopped down on the ground like a dead lizard. It's not fair, I said to Oprah. I am no bigger than you, and I'm having to do 100 times the work, and it is boiling. Have some raisins, she replied apologetically. I reached out, still enjoying my horizontal position, then jumped as a voice coughed close by, a male voice, Marlon. Would you like some water? He said pleasantly. His slightly protruding eyes were still trying not to look at me, sprawled as I was in the dirt. My cheeks would have flushed with embarrassment if they hadn't been so red already. I scrambled up to standing, pulling down my dress, and catching my sweaty headscarves as it started to fall off my head. My mother just came back from the well with a fresh jar, Marlon said quietly. He had it by his side. Oprah held out a water skin and Marlon took it from her, immersing it inside the jar so that it would fill up. Thank you, Oprah said shyly, and took back the skin. Would you like some raisin? She had a whole cake of them, 100 of the delicious dried fruits squished together in a circle as big as a palm. She broke off some and handed them to Marlon, then some to me. The three of us stood and munched awkwardly. It was Marlon who broke the silence. In Israel, he said thoughtfully in the strange accents, the gleaning done by poor people, not children. Gleaning? I asked. That must be an Israelite word. You know, when they go around picking up the last few bits of grains that they have missed, he waved his hand towards the field. In Israel, we leave those bits. Then the poor can pick them up and take them for themselves. I scoffed. I couldn't stop myself. That's stupid, I said. No wonder you didn't have enough to eat, if you were letting other people have some of it for free. He flushed. No, that's not... Anyways, I interrupted. There aren't any poor people here, are there? I appealed to Oprah. She looked doubtful. Well, she said, there's Sola. The widow? Asked Marlon, interestedly. The one with the cracks in her wall? Zoella isn't poor, I insisted. Zoella was poor, though. It was had been a widow. Her only daughter had left to get married years ago. Zoella had a son too, but he died as a baby. And her husband had died around the same time. Zoella had been on her own for as long as I'd been alive, and before then too. She was all right, though, I thought. She seemed to survive, didn't she? Just like everybody else. I had never really thought about it before. Is she here? Marlon asked, looking around. My mother was asking after her. She visits her sometimes. She said she's lonely. I bit my lips. Zoella did normally make it out for the harvest, but this time she wasn't here. I'm sure she's fine, I answered coldly. There was silence. Why do people leave the grain like you said? Oprah asked. In the fields in Israel? Don't they need it? Marlon frowned in thought. Well, yes, but then, so do the poor. He hesitated, then plunged on. Well, poor Israelites are still Israelites, children of Abraham, part of God's people. And God is kind to us all. I put my last raisin in my mouth and chewed it, feeling uncomfortable. I didn't understand this Israelite God. How could you worship only one? And how could he be kind? God showed favor to you if you gave them the right offering in theory. But really, they did what they wanted. So, what did it mean for a God to be kind and loyal? I didn't get it. Marlon gave a slow smile. Well, he said, hefting his water jar, I'll better get along and see if anyone wants. His voice trailed off. What? I cried, whirling round to see where his gate had gone to. What is it? But the field was such a confusion of people, and the sun was so bright, I couldn't spot what he was looking at. I heard it instead, a huge ragged scream, a guttering of horrible sob, and finally, I saw that it was all coming from Naomi. Naomi knelt over Elimelech, mourning. She slapped his cheeks, then balled her fist and hit him in the chest. But nothing was going to make him respond. We could all see that. He just laid there, limp, lifeless, dead. Killian stood just beside Naomi, his face pale. It just collapsed. He was muttering mindlessly. How is he? How do you... Marlon, ignoring him, went forward and pulled his mother upright, squeezing her into an embrace. The whole village had gathered around them, Oppa and I included. We stayed back though. While the adults crowded in front of us, Naomi was still mourning. It was a deep animal sound, a horrible sound. There were other voices too now. Dina was saying something about the gods. My father was talking about moving the body. I felt like half of me was sleeping sideways. I didn't even really know Elimelech, but he had been alive and now he's dead. Just like that. I took a step backwards. Then I said, we should go and check on Zoella. Oppa looked frightened. Are you sure? We should go and check on her, I said firmly. She's lonely. Come on. The door on Zoella's house was just a few uneven planks nailed together with gaps in between. It leaned against the opening, doing a bad job of blocking out draught. There was no hesitating now. I grabbed it and shoved it aside, calling Zoella's name as I did so. And peering into the dark doorways. There was no answer. Zoella, I called again, taking a step forward so that Oppa wouldn't see how scared I was. Maybe she's asleep, I said confidently. Oppa began, but I interrupted her by calling out the widow's name again. Zoella! Hello! My eyes were adjusting to the gloom now. I was entering one of the two small walls. This one was even smaller than I remembered it from the last time I came in here, when I was little. Dirtier as well. Though someone had clearly made an effort recently. A space in the middle of the floor had been swept, and there was a pile of cooking pans that looked freshly scrubbed. I wrinkled my nose. I'd never really thought about how grim life must be for Zoella, living alone. Grim and dirty. She barely had the strength to potter down to the fields. She suddenly couldn't wash clothes or sweep floors or scrub hands. So who had done those? Oppa was in the broom too by now. She touched the walls. There were cracks on the inside, just like on the outside. How could she bear to live here? She whispered. She had no choice, I replied, swallowing. This is why everyone wants son, who'll be around when they're too old to avoid this. Opposite the entrance was another doorway, this one concealed by a curtain. Zoella must be through there. Sleeping, probably. What if, said Oppa, but she didn't dare to finish her sentence. Look, I said in a voice that was a bit too loud. I used my foot to notch a bucket I spotted on the floor. Someone must have brought this. A package of food? Oppa bent to look. Yes. Oh. She reached into the basket and pulled out a little clay bowl with a few dried olives in it. This is ours. My mother's. Naomi asked to borrow it. I'm sure it's the same one. Our eyes met. Then, Naomi has been bringing Zoella food, I said, even though she had so little herself. And she must be the one who scrubbed those pans, added Oppa. There was silence. Then we both turned again to the ragged curtains hanging in the doorways to the next room. Alpa reached out and grabbed my hands. Taking a deep breath, we went through the curtains together. Zoella was asleep when we found her, but she wasn't well. She was grating sound deep in her chest, and when we woke her up, she was too stiff to move. We tried to do a few things for her, tidying and so on, but we knew there wasn't much point anymore. She wasn't going to get out of bed again. A few days after Elimelech died, Zoella died too. After that, I decided I wanted to be like Naomi. I wanted to be kind. I found ways to visit Dinah's house and help the Israelite woman. I went to the well for her, even though I hated having to carry the heavy water jars all the way back. I patched up an old pair of my father's shoes and presented them to Marlon. I spoke in a low voice because I knew Naomi was grieving and shouldn't be disturbed too much. I even cleared out Zoella's house and didn't complain about having to be part of the funeral. A few weeks after the two deaths, I came out of the house to see Marlon inspecting the cracks in the wall of Zoella's house. Naomi stood beside her son, her arms folded. You see, I don't think it's all that hard to repair, Marlon was saying. Ma, I asked some of the men and they said, I don't care, snapped Naomi. But Ma, Marlon responded, don't you want to have your own home again? It's a good plan, I promise you. Nobody else has claimed this house yet, and once we've moved in, no one will stop us. No, Naomi said curtly. She pursed her lips. This isn't our home. We're not going to stay here. But we can't go back. Not while there's still famine. We're Israelite, Marlon, Naomi said. Israelites, no Moabites. But we're in Moab for now, Ma, Marlon insisted. I stayed motionless. Neither of them had spotted me yet. We're a descendant from Abraham, Naomi said to her son. Ma, I know this. We're a descendant from Abraham, she said again in a warning tone. And Abraham was called into our land by God personally. The Lord appeared to him and told him he would make his name great again and make his family into a great nation. He told him he would give his descendant the land of Israel. Marlon, not the land of Moab. Abraham and his wife Sarah couldn't have children, she went on, and they wondered what the future would be. But finally, our great God gave them a son, Isaac. And Isaac had a son, Jacob. And the Lord said to him too, I will make a nation of you. I will give you a land, and I will be your God. So you see, the three things go together. God, people, and land. I know, Marlon said wearily. Naomi pursed her lips again, this time with pride. We're children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We are Israelites of the tribe of Judah. What are you thinking, Marlon? Are you going to forget who you are? Are you going to? I don't know. Marry a Moabite daughter, a Moabite girl, and settle down there? No, you are not. You're an Israelite. You belong with God's people. I understand that, Ma, answered Marlon patiently. I am not suggesting we stay here forever. I'm just saying this house is empty and we could move into it, just for a bit, until we are ready to go back. He turned to the walls again. I really think we should repair this. And the old lady liked you, didn't she? Wouldn't she have been pleased to think that you were going to move into her house instead of all the Moabites who'd never bothered to look after her? I bit my lips. Let me at least try to repair it, said Marlon. There was silence. I could see that Marlon was going to take that as a yes. The Israelites next door. Marlon's plans worked. The Israelites did move into Zoella's house. They had to rebuild the whole thing, the whole wall, but they moved in. Now that they were only next door, it was easy to get to know them. My father would often call on the boys to help him with something, grumbling that he wished he had grown up sons of his own to help him instead. And I would find an excuse to go and sit with Naomi. Orpah came to sometimes. Even though Naomi had spoken so strongly about staying in Moab, she didn't seem to mind us spending time with her. In fact, I thought she liked it. My tactic was to ask questions about the history of her people and about the Israelite God. Since that was what she was so proud of, and she was always so happy to tell us a story. Sometimes it would be about Abraham, the ancestors of all the Israelites, or his grandson, Jacob. Sometimes it would be about the Israelites, about when the Israelites were slaves in Egypt and God rescued them. Sometimes it would be about the women of Israel. After a few months, Orpah and I knew the story well enough to start even having arguments about which was the best. The following spring, news came from Israel. The harvest looked bad again. The Israelites would have to stay. My mother looked pleased. Perhaps they'll stay forever. I didn't like the idea of having Israelites here at first, but the boys are a good addition to the village. I wouldn't mind having a son-in-law like one of those boys, my father said. My mother looked at me pointedly. Ma, no. I said, no. I see what you're thinking. But Naomi will never let one of her sons marry me. They won't marry anyone who isn't an Israelite. And also, they don't want to stay in Moab. They believe that their God, gave them their land. He promised it to Abraham, their ancestor. It's the only place where they can worship God, their God, properly. Well, they didn't come to Moab then, asked my father dismissively. It does look like they're going to stay, Ruth, said my mother, particularly if the famine lasts. And your father is right. Mahlon would be a good husband for you. Naomi will say no if you ask her, I answered. But to my complete surprise, when they did ask her, she said yes. She frowned, but she said yes. We didn't get married straight away. Mahlon wanted to make the whole widow's house a bit bigger first, particularly as Kilon would also get married before long. And I had a lot of weaving to do before we could have a wedding. But at the start of my 16th summer, we married, and I moved in with the Israelites. I immediately began to campaign to get Orpah to marry Kilion, and it was successful. She moved in a year later. But the next bit of the story is going to be hard for me to talk about. I'm sorry. We lived together for 6 years. They weren't perfect years, of course. Neither Orpah nor I had a child, not even a daughter, and that was honestly a worry. But we were still young, and Naomi always told us that we had to wait until the Lord God was ready to give us a child. He's loyal to our people, she said. But then, I told you it would be hard for me to talk about. Then the worst thing I could ever have imagined happened. Mahlon got sick. And so did Kilion. Really, really sick. On Mahlon's final day of life, there were a few moments when the fever seemed to fade away, and he was himself again. It was weak and still trembling, but it was Mahlon. He reached out and took my hands. I'm sorry, Ruth. I'm sorry. I swallowed hard. Don't be sorry. We've been all right, haven't we? I'll be all right. Kilon will look after you, he said urgently. Or you can marry someone else. No, I answered, squeezing his hands. I won't abandon this family. You're so kind, Mahlon whispered. If only we had another brother. You could marry him. Then you'd be safe. I'll be fine, I told him. Kilion will look after you, he said. I did not have the heart to tell him that Kilion was lying sick with the same fever just on the other side of the wall. I squeezed his hands harder. This time it wasn't to comfort him, it was to comfort me. Or to make me feel like I had something to hold on to. But Mahlon didn't seem to notice. His eyes had closed and his hand had gone limp again. I don't want to be a widow, I said in a tiny voice. I let go of Mahlon and pressed my hands against my eyes, trying to hold back the thick tears. But I couldn't stop them. Is it a curse? I asked my husband miserably. Is the God of Israel angry with you for marrying me? when you should have married an Israelite? And angry with Kilion as well? You've always said he's a kind God. But is that not true? Is it all our fault? Mahlon did not reply. I wish I had been born an Israelite, I said. I wish. But my words dissolved into tears. Then Naomi was there, her hands touching my hair. I reached out for her mindlessly. I don't want him to die, sobbed into her chest. I don't want him to die. Naomi tucked my head under her chin and rocked me like a baby. I know, my daughter, she said. We stayed like that, watching over Mahlon, for a long while. He died that day, and Kilion died a few days later. Our poor mother-in-law had now lost her husband and both her sons. Orpah and I wept, and wept, and wept. But Naomi was inconsolable. She barely ate for a week. Naomi had never been fat, but now she was worryingly wispy. We buried our boys beside Elimelech, a little way outside the village, since they never fully belonged there. It was not long afterwards that another traveler arrived, one who had been through Israel. He told us that everything was fine there now. The famine was over, and people were getting on with their lives. I saw the look in Naomi's eyes as she heard those words, that bittersweet glint mixing sadness with hope. I knew at once that what was coming. She stood up, pursing her lips, and drew a shawl across her thin shoulders. She looked at Orpah, and then she looked at me. I want to go home, she said.
Wow, those chapters were a little bit hard to read because they were really heavy. They were really sad tonight. But it was just the reality of Ruth's life. What we read about tonight really did happen to Ruth. Her father-in-law died, her husband died, and her husband's brother died. All within a very short span, it seems like. Well, Ruth is going to learn more and more about the one true God, and we're going to see that happen as we continue reading. But let me give you some information that's here in this book on pages 162 and 163 if you want to follow along. From chapter 4. You can read more about gleaning in Leviticus chapter 19 and chapter 23 and in Deuteronomy chapter 24. The practice wasn't just a custom, it was a law that was given by God. It's really striking that the last bits of food in the field or on the trees were not just left for the poor, but also for foreigners. God had chosen the Israelites as his own people, but that never meant that he didn't care about other people as well. In chapter 5, the Bible doesn't tell us as much about Elimelech's death. Ruth chapter 1 verse 3 simply says, Now Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. The scene with Sola is invented. Actually, the whole character of Sola is invented. Her character helps us understand why it is so tough to be a widow in the ancient world, especially one without a son. This will be important later on. Nowadays, it's no problem to be an unmarried woman. Many women never get married in the first place, and becoming widowed, while it is very sad, is manageable. But in ancient times, being a widow was a disaster. You needed a man's strength and protection for all sorts of things, and without it, you struggled. That's why God often instructed his people to take care of widows. They need help. You can read about the story of Abraham's call in Genesis 12, verses 1 through 7. He's called Abram in that passage. His name changed later. You can also read God's promises to Abraham and to his grandson Jacob in Genesis chapter 17 and chapter 28. In this chapter, chapter 5, Naomi refers to God as the Lord. He is often called this in the Bible, and the word appears in capitals, L-O-R-D. It's a way of showing respect for God. Even his name is holy, so the Israelites avoided using it and instead called him Adonai, the Lord. In chapter 6, a lot of time passes. Ruth 1:5 is very briefly tells us about the death of Mahlon and Chilion. The focus there isn't on Ruth's grief, but on Naomi's. She was left without her 2 sons and her husband. In a world where women need the protection of a man, this was a very serious situation indeed. Well, we're going to pick up in chapter 7 next week on Wednesday. I hope that you will join us in our YouTube book club.